a $500 million deal, a conference room full of attorneys, and a man who walked in with nothing but a folder and a truth nobody wanted to hear. The signatures were already laid out on the table. Then the door opened. He wasn't supposed to be there. No title, no legal team, no appointment, just a worn canvas bag and 5 years of waiting for the right room and the right person to finally ask the right question. She looked at him across that table. He looked back, and in the silence that followed, a $500 million transaction 8 months in the making, built on trust she had never thought to question, began to come apart at the seams. Not because of what he demanded, because of what he knew, and what he knew was going to change everything. Camille Devereaux did not believe in omens. She believed in data, in preparation, in the kind of thorough, methodical work that left no room for surprise. She had run Devereaux Aerospace for 3 years on exactly that philosophy, and it had not failed her yet. So when the flight attendant handed her a fresh cup of coffee at 30,000 feet and the liquid sat perfectly still in the cup, despite mild turbulence, Camille did not think, "This is going well." She thought, "The stabilizers on this aircraft are well maintained." Then she went back to her briefing folder. $520 million. That was the number at the top of the term sheet. That was the number Raymond had called her about at 6 that morning, before she had finished her first cup of coffee, before she had put on the burgundy dress she always wore when she needed a room to understand immediately that she had not come to negotiate the basics. Raymond Ashford had been calling her early in the morning since she was 9 years old. Back then he called for her father to talk about contracts, about partnerships, about the kind of deals that kept Devereaux Aerospace alive through the lean years, when her father was still building something from nothings in a field that did not make room for men who looked like him. Raymond had been there for all of it. The first government contract, the first acquisition, the first time the board had tried to push her father out, and Raymond had stood in that room and talked them down with a calm that she had admired from the doorway when she was supposed to be in bed. When her father died 3 years ago, Raymond was the first person she called. Not because he was the closest, because she knew he would know what to say about the company. And in that moment, that was the only thing that felt manageable. He had not disappointed her. He had walked her through the board transition, through the first quarterly earnings call she had to lead alone, through the moment 6 months in when a journalist had written a piece questioning whether she was genuinely capable or simply inheriting a name. Raymond had helped her prepare her response. He had sat across from her at the conference table and said, "You say exactly nothing. You let the numbers speak." And the numbers did. So when Raymond said this deal was important, she believed him. When Raymond said the window would not stay open forever, she believed that too. And when Raymond said on the phone at 6 that morning, with his voice carrying the particular steadiness she had known her whole life, "Do not let any individual party delay the closing," Camille had written it down and not asked what he meant. She was thinking about that phrase now, somewhere over Alabama, with the clouds below her breaking up into fragments, and Houston appearing as a suggestion on the horizon. Do not let any individual party delay the closing. She had assumed he meant regulators, or the financing consortium, or one of the Stratos board members who had been lukewarm about the deal from the beginning. She had not asked because she trusted Raymond's read on these situations more than her own. She was still not asking. But the phrase sat in the back of her mind like a splinter, not painful, just present. The Stratos Aviation acquisition had been 8 months in the making. The company was not glamorous. The company, it occupied a cluster of low industrial buildings outside Houston. Its workforce was under 500 people, and its revenue was modest enough that more than one analyst had questioned why Devereaux was interested at all. The answer was Nova9, a navigational system that could maintain accurate positional data even when primary electronics experienced cascade failure. Not a dramatic capability in the abstract, but in the specific language of aviation certification and next-generation commercial contracts. It was the kind of technology that entire market segments got built around. Nova9 was buried in Stratos's intellectual property portfolio like a diamond in a hardware store. Most people walking through had not noticed it. Camille had. Her father had taught her to look past the revenue line. "Look at what they've built," he used to say. Not what they've sold, what they've built. She had been looking at Nova 9 for 8 months, and now she was 40 minutes from closing. The attendant came back to check on her. Camille shook her head slightly. No, she was fine. She had everything she needed, which was not exactly true. But she would not know that for another 4 hours. Damon Cole had the middle seat. This was not unusual. He almost always had the middle seat. Not because he booked late, though sometimes he did. Not because he was disorganized, though his apartment in Houston would have suggested otherwise. He had the middle seat because he never paid for an upgrade, and he never asked for anything different, and the universe, in his experience, tended to give you exactly what you asked for, and nothing more. The man on his left was asleep within 20 minutes of takeoff. The woman on his right was watching something on her tablet with earbuds in. Damon had a paperback that he had opened and closed twice already, and on his lap, under his hands, a folder that had gone soft at the corners from years of being opened and closed and carried from place to place and never quite put down. He knew what was in it without looking. He had read it enough times that the words had taken on the particular flatness of things memorized by necessity rather than choice. Patent filing numbers, assignment clauses, a counter-proposal he had written and revised again over 4 years, until it said exactly what he needed it to say in exactly the right order. 11 pages. He had spent 4 years getting to 11 pages. His phone buzzed against his thigh. He picked it up. Evelyn Cross, General Counsel, Stratos Aviation. She had been sending variations of the same message for 3 days. This one said, "You still have time to turn around. There's another way to handle this." He looked at the message for a moment. Then he typed back, "There is no other way. I'll be there in the morning." He put the phone face down on the tray table, pulled the photo out of the front pocket of his jacket. Jerome standing in front of the Stratos facility on the day they first walked through it together. 2019. Jerome was grinning in the way he always grinned when something had just clicked into place for him. Wide, unguarded. The grin of a man who had solved a problem he had been thinking about for months, and was allowing himself, just for a moment, to feel it. Damon had taken the photo on his phone. Jerome had said, "Stop." Damon had taken it anyway. He put it back in his pocket, looked at the window. The clouds were breaking up over Texas. The sky below was going orange in the way it did in late afternoon out here. That specific Houston orange that didn't look like anywhere else. Warm and heavy and a little like something ending. He was not a man who believed in signs, but he thought Jerome would have something to say about me sitting in a middle seat on the way to do this. Something that would have made him laugh despite himself. He did not laugh, but he thought about it for a long time. The storm front arrived without announcing itself. The pilot's voice came over the intercom at 35,000 feet, calm in the way pilots' voices are always calm, which is a specific kind of calm trained into a person, specifically because the alternative would cause problems. A weather system had developed over the Gulf and pushed inland faster than forecasted. The primary Houston airport was temporarily suspending approaches. All inbound traffic was being diverted to a regional field about 40 miles east of the city. On the Devereaux charter jet, the attendant brought the news to Camille personally. She looked up from the term sheet. How long? Minimum 2 hours before Houston reopens. Possibly more. Camille closed the folder. Fine, she said. On the commercial flight, the same announcement came through the same way, the same careful calm, and around Damon the cabin shifted. People checked phones, recalculated connections. The woman with the tablet pulled out her earbuds and started talking to someone about a hotel. Damon looked out the window. He was not worried about a connection. He was not worried about a hotel. He just looked at the clouds coming in low and thought, all right, a delay. Everything had already taken 4 years. A few more hours was not going to change anything that mattered. He put the folder in his bag, held onto the bag, waited. The Westfield Regional Airport served, on a normal day, perhaps 30 arrivals, 2 commercial routes, and a handful of private charters. It had a baggage claim that was really one carousel, a coffee stand that closed at 4 in the afternoon, and a waiting area designed for the population of a small Texas town's idea of what a waiting area needed to be. This was not a normal day. 6 commercial diversions had come in within 90 minutes. The charter jet had landed first. By the time the commercial flights began arriving, Camille's team was already inside, already on phones, already discovering that the convoy of vehicles booked for the drive to Houston was stuck on a road that the storm had made temporarily impassable. Camille stood near the window with her phone in one hand and watched the situation reorganize itself with the focused irritation of someone who has a very clear schedule and is watching it become approximate. Her chief of staff, a woman named Brianna, who had not slept more than 5 hours in 3 days, was working the phones beside her. 2 attorneys were at a corner table with laptops open. Outside, the rain was coming down sideways, and the parking lot looked like a lake that had not existed an hour ago. Do not let any individual party delay the closing. Camille checked the time. The closing was scheduled for 10 the next morning. It was currently 4:15. Even accounting for the diversion, even accounting for the storm, there was time. The roads would clear. Transport would come. They would be in Houston tonight. She told herself this. It was reasonable. It was probably true. She was still telling herself this when the commercial arrivals started coming through the glass doors from the tarmac. She noticed him because he stopped. That was the first thing. In a crowd of people moving with the specific forward momentum of travelers who have been inconvenienced and want to resolve the inconvenience, this man stopped, just inside the doors, set down a worn canvas bag, and then reached back to hold the door open for an older gentleman who was having trouble with a large rolling suitcase that had gotten caught on the threshold. Not in a performative way. Not with the look of someone doing a kind thing, while hoping someone is watching. He just stopped and held the door, and helped the man get his suitcase through, and said something that made the older man laugh. Then he picked up his own bag and kept moving. Camille watched this for approximately 8 seconds. Then she looked back at her phone. He sat down 3 seats to her left. Canvas jacket, old Gregory backpack, a folder he set on the seat beside him. He did not take out a phone, did not open a laptop, just sat and after a moment looked out the window at the rain. She was on her second unanswered call to Brianna when the waiting area got louder. More arrivals, more chaos. The coffee stand was now inexplicably open again, and had a line 12 people deep. Someone's suitcase had fallen over in the middle of the floor, and was creating a small traffic problem. 2 people were having a debate near the baggage carousel that was escalating in a way that suggested neither of them was going to win. Camille said, more to fill the silence than because she needed an answer, business or family. He turned and looked at her. His eyes were dark and steady and gave nothing away. Both, he said. Maybe. She nodded. What field? Aviation systems. She processed this, categorized it. Aviation systems at a regional Texas airport during a diversion. Maintenance contractor. Component supplier rep. Someone who worked with the physical infrastructure of flight rather than the business of it. I'm here to close an acquisition, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Stratos, he said. A small, clean surprise. The kind that comes not from shock but from realizing you've been slightly careless. Small industry, he said. News moves fast. It does, she agreed. She turned back to her phone. But the surprise stayed. She didn't usually feel surprised. She was good at managing the variables of a room before she walked into it, and she did not often find herself facing one she had not accounted for. He knew about Stratos. That was either nothing, a contractor who followed industry news, a supplier who knew his clients, or it was something she couldn't see yet. She filed it, did not attach significance, kept working. The shuttle van arrived 50 minutes later. A single 12-passenger vehicle run by a regional car service that was doing its best under conditions it was not staffed for. The driver announced he could take people to the 2 hotels in the nearest town. First come, first served. Camille's team occupied 7 seats immediately. The attorneys went in first, then Brianna, then the 2 financial analysts who had been on their own charter. Camille took the window seat behind the driver. He took the window seat at the back. The van pulled out of the lot and drove east on a 2-lane road that ran alongside a low ridge. The rain easing now to something steadier and quieter, and the flat text dark settling over everything the way it did out here, not gradually, but all at once, like a decision. Camille had her phone out, was running through emails, the term sheet, the closing schedule, a message from one of the Stratos board members confirming his attendance for tomorrow. She was doing all of this, being efficient, being prepared, and she was also, without meaning to, watching him in the reflection of the window. He was not on his phone, not working, not sleeping, though it was the kind of ride that invited it. He was looking out at the dark, at the two-lane road and the flat Texas ground and the occasional light from a ranch or a filling station. And he looked like a man who had been somewhere for a long time and was measuring how it had or hadn't changed. Not a contractor making a plant visit. She didn't know why she thought that, but she thought it. They passed a green highway sign. Stratos Aviation Industrial Park, 18 miles. She watched him in the window's reflection. He went still, not dramatically. No sharp breath, no sudden movement. Just a stillness that settled over him, like something that had been waiting. His jaw set, his hands resting on the bag in his lap, tightened slightly. He looked at that sign for as long as it was visible. Then he looked back at the dark. His phone rang. He answered it. She was not trying to listen, but the van was quiet and he was 8 feet away, and she was a person who noticed things. He said, "I'll be there in the morning." A pause. He said, "I know what I'm doing." Another pause, longer. Something being said on the other end that was not short. Then quietly, with a tone she had not expected from someone she had mentally placed in a specific and limited category, "Tell them it has to be the original draft. The one from 2019. He hung up. She saw, in the brief light before he put the phone back in his pocket, the name on the screen. E. Cross. Evelyn Cross. General Counsel, Stratos Aviation. She did not turn her head, did not change her posture, kept her eyes on her own screen, but her hand, moving to pull up the next email, slowed for just a moment. Evelyn Cross. Stratos Legal. The original draft, the one from 2019. She was still running those 3 facts when the van pulled into the hotel parking lot and the driver announced they had arrived. She stepped out into the damp Texas night, looked up once at the sky, which had cleared slightly, a few stars, showing through the gaps. Then she went inside and told Brianna, "Run a background on the man who just got out of the van. Everything." By midnight, Brianna did not ask which man. She had been working for Camille for 4 years. She knew that tone. She had a cup of coffee and her laptop open and a name she was waiting for. Camille gave it to her in the elevator. His first name is Damon. Last name I don't have yet. He knows Evelyn Cross personally. He said aviation systems when I asked what he did. He was on a commercial flight. He has a folder he doesn't let go of. The elevator doors opened. He's connected to Stratos, Camille said. Find out how. In her room, she ordered food she did not eat and sat at the small desk by the window with her laptop open and the term sheet in front of her and went through the same documents she had reviewed 11 times in the past month. She was looking for something she had not seen before. She did not know what it was. She was looking anyway. The results came at 11:47. Brianna knocked once, came in, set a printed document on the desk without being asked and stood back. Camille looked at the first page. No current corporate affiliation, no executive profile, no board seats, no industry appearances in the past 3 years, a Texas driver's license, a Houston address. She turned to the second page, patent filings, 2014 through 2022. All bearing the same inventor names, Damon R. Cole and Jerome A. Cole. Several assigned to Stratos Aviation, several not. She turned to the page Brianna had flagged with a sticky note that said only, "See this." It was the assignment clause on the primary Nova 9 patent. She read it. Transfer of rights to any third party requires the written authorization of the named primary rights holder. Primary rights holder, Damon R. Cole. She read it again, and then she set the document down very carefully on the desk and sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. The term sheet she had been carrying for 8 months, the deal she had spent more hours on than she could count. The acquisition that Raymond had told her was the most important move Devereaux Aerospace would make in the next decade. None of it could close without that man's signature. That man who had flown in on a commercial flight, who had a folder with soft corners, who had said aviation systems like it was nothing, who had held a door open for an older gentleman without thinking about it, and then sat down 3 seats away from her and looked out at the rain. That man. She had not let him make an impression. She had categorized him in the first 30 seconds and filed him and moved on. The way she moved through most things that did not immediately announce their relevance. She pulled the document back toward her. Read the assignment clause a third time. Then she said quietly, to no one in particular, how did I not know about this? Brianna, who was still standing by the door, said, that's the question I've been sitting with for the last hour. Camille looked at her. There's more, Brianna said. She put a second document on the desk. This one had a sticky note that said, this one you really need to see. It was a page from the Devereaux Aerospace Internal HR Archive, an employment application. Filed in 2018, Navigational Systems Engineer, Senior Level. The applicant's name was Damon R. Cole. There was a rejection notice attached, dated March 2018. The rejection had been signed by the VP of Operations at Devereaux Aerospace. That VP had been Camille Devereaux. She stared at the page, and then she put it down, flat on the desk, like she needed to stop looking at it. Because the man in the van, the man 3 seats to her left in the waiting room, the man with the folder and the canvas jacket and the steady eyes and the phone call to Stratos Legal. She had told him no. 6 years ago, he had applied to work for her company, in the department she ran, doing the exact work that the technology she was now spending $520 million to acquire was built on. And she had said no. She stood up from the desk, walked to the window, looked out at the hotel parking lot, the wet asphalt, the line of rental cars, the dark Texas flat spreading out beyond the lights. Her mind was doing several things at once. Trying to remember if she had reviewed his application personally. She probably had. She reviewed them all at that level. She had been rigorous about that, about not rubber stamping the decisions that came up through HR, about reading the files herself. She had read his file, and then she had said no. She did not remember why. That was the part that sat wrong. She was good at remembering decisions. She remembered almost every significant call she had made in her career, the reasoning, the context, the information she had been working with. But this one she turned around, looked at the rejection notice again from across the room. 2018. She had been VP of Operations. She had been running 2 departments and managing a board transition, and trying to prove that her father's faith in her was not sentimentality. She had been reviewing a lot of applications that year. She walked back to the desk, picked up the rejection notice, read it again. It said the standard things rejection notices said. Thank you for your interest. After careful consideration, pursue other opportunities. Nothing in it told her why. She put it down. Stood there for a moment with one hand on the desk and one thought moving through everything else like a river through flat ground. He knows. He knows I signed this. He has known since before he got on that plane. And he had sat 3 seats away from her, had answered her question with 2 words, had looked out the window at nothing in particular, had not said you don't remember me, had not said I applied to your company once, had not said anything except aviation systems and maybe both. She looked at the clock. 11:52. 8 hours until the closing. She picked up her phone, called Raymond. It rang 4 times. Then his voicemail. She stood there with the phone in her hand. Do not let any individual party delay the closing. That was what he had said this morning. Before she knew any of this. Not regulators. Not the financing consortium. Not the Stratos board members. Any individual party. She looked at the documents on the desk. The assignment clause, the rejection notice, the folder full of patent filings bearing 2 names, one of which belonged to a man sleeping 1 floor above her, maybe 2 in this same hotel, on a standard room that she was now almost certain he had booked weeks ago when he first decided he was coming. The original draft, the one from 2019. She pulled up the full Stratos due diligence file on her laptop, started at the beginning, not the summary. Not the executive overview, the raw correspondence, month by month. Month 1, month 2, month 3. She was looking for something. Month 4. There was a memo, internal. Flagged as reviewed, she opened it. It was a summary of the IP due diligence pass. 3rd paragraph. A note about the Nova 9 patent structure. The assignment clause. The requirement for written authorization from the primary rights holder. The memo had been sent to 3 people. 2 of them she did not recognize. legal staff at the firm handling the due diligence. The third person it had been sent to was Raymond Ashford. The date on the memo was 4 months ago. She looked at the date, looked at it for a long time. 4 months ago. He had known about the assignment clause 4 months ago. He had been copied on the memo himself. He had not forwarded it to her. He had not mentioned it in any of the weekly calls she and Raymond had about this deal. He had not raised it in any of the board briefings. He had not said a single word about it. 4 months. She had been working on this deal for 8 months. Raymond had known about the patent rights issue for 4 of them. And he had said, "Do not let any individual party delay the closing." Not, "There is an issue with the IP structure you need to know about." Not, "I need to brief you on something that affects the assignment." Do not let any individual party delay the closing. She closed the laptop. She did not call Raymond back. She turned off the light at the desk and sat in the dark with the curtain slightly open, so the parking lot light came through in a thin stripe across the floor. She thought, not about the term sheet, not about the closing schedule. She thought about that phrase, and about the memo, and about a man who had sat 3 seats away from her, and said nothing about any of this. And she thought, what is in that folder? She thought, I should sleep. I have 8 hours, and I should sleep, and tomorrow I will walk into that room knowing what I know now, and I will handle it. She thought that. She was a person who could usually make herself believe the reasonable thing. Tonight she sat in the dark for a long time, with the parking lot light making a thin stripe across the floor, and she did not sleep for a while, because the thing she kept coming back to was not the clause, was not the memo, was not even the fact that Raymond had known for 4 months and said nothing. The thing she kept coming back to was the way Damon Cole had looked at that highway sign, Stratos Aviation Industrial Park, 18 miles. The way he had gone still, completely still, like a man finding a location he had been carrying in his mind for a long time, like a man who had waited for something and was now watching it become close enough to touch. She had read people her whole career. She was good at it. Not perfect, but good. And what she had read in that moment in the brief window of the van's dark reflection was not a contractor making a plant visit, was not a maintenance tech on a service call, was a man who had been moving toward this for years. She turned over in the dark and closed her eyes. The next hours were going to tell her everything. She was going to be ready, or she was going to find out what she didn't know yet, which was maybe the same thing. Outside, the rain had stopped. The Texas sky was doing what it did after a storm, opening back up in that specific way, all at once, like it had simply decided the drama was over. The parking lot lights reflected in the standing water. Somewhere on the floor above, or maybe 2 floors, a door opened and then closed. And in the folder on the nightstand in room 214, because she had not been able to leave it in her bag, had taken it out and put it where she could see. It were documents she had not finished reading. Month 4. She had only gotten to month 4. She thought about that as she lay there. There were 4 more months she had not looked at yet. She reached over in the dark, picked up the folder, turned on the small lamp, started reading. She read until 2 in the morning. Then she put the folder down, turned off the lamp, lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything she had just read and everything she had not yet found and the difference between those 2 things, which was turning out to be significant. Month 5, month 6, 7, 8. The due diligence file was thorough. Her team had done good work. Thorough, careful, well-organized work that had produced a complete picture of Stratos Aviation's financials, operations, workforce, real estate, contracts, and liabilities. What it had not produced was a single follow-up to the month 4 memo. The memo that had landed on Raymond's desk. The one about the assignment clause. The one that should have generated a conversation, a plan, a disclosure to the CEO who was about to sign a $520 million deal that could not legally close without a signature from a man named Damon Cole. No follow-up, no response, no trail. Like the memo had arrived and then simply stopped existing. She had worked in this industry long enough to know that documents did not stop existing by accident. She turned over, looked at the window. The parking lot light was still doing its thin stripe across the floor. Do not let any individual party delay the closing? Raymond had said that this morning, before she knew about the clause, before she had run Damon's background, before she had found the memo. He had said it like a reminder, like a thing she might need to know, except it wasn't a reminder. It was a warning dressed up as advice. She closed her eyes, opened them again, because she could not sleep. Because her mind was running the way it ran when she was in the middle of something that had more layers than she could see yet. Because somewhere above her or below her, in a standard room in this same hotel, a man named Damon Cole was either sleeping or not sleeping. And either way he had a folder and a plan and 4 years of preparation, and she was just now, at 2 in the morning, beginning to understand the shape of what she had walked into. Fine. She sat up, turned the lamp back on, picked up her phone and opened the full patent filing document Brianna had sent her. Started at the beginning this time, not the assignment clause, the whole thing. Nova 9 Navigational Integration System. Filed 2019. Primary inventors, Jerome A. Cole and Damon R. Cole. Assigned in part to Stratos Aviation under a deferred compensation agreement, dated October 2019, subject to the following conditions. She read the conditions, then she read them again. Then she set the phone down and sat very still on the edge of the hotel bed, in her burgundy dress that she had never changed out of, and thought, Jerome A. Cole, primary inventor. Listed first. Not Damon, Jerome. She had been looking at Damon, focused on Damon. Because Damon was the one who had walked into the shuttle van and answered his phone and said the one from 2019 like it meant something. Because Damon was the one the assignment clause named. Because Damon was the one she could see. Jerome had been the other name on the patent, the one she had not thought to look up separately. She picked up the phone again, typed the name. Jerome A. Cole, Houston. Aviation Systems. 3 results. The first was a LinkedIn profile that had not been updated since 2020. The second was a brief mention in an industry newsletter from 2019. A note about the Nova 9 development team at Stratos. A paragraph that named 4 engineers. Jerome Cole was listed second. The third result stopped her. An obituary. Posted in a Houston community paper in March 2020. Jerome Avery Cole, 34, passed away following a workplace accident. She put the phone down, picked it up again, read the obituary 3 times. 34 years old, March 2020, a workplace accident, at Stratos Aviation. She sat with that for a long time. Long enough that the parking lot light shifted slightly as clouds moved across what was left of the night sky. Long enough that the hotel settled into the deeper quiet that only comes after midnight, when the last person has stopped moving through the hallways and the ice machine has gone still. Jerome Cole had built Nova 9, or co-built it, or built the foundation of it, and then Jerome Cole had died at the site where he built it. In the same year the patent was filed, and Damon had spent 4 years since then. 4 years of preparation, 11 pages. A upholster with soft corners from being carried everywhere and never quite put down. She understood now why he was not sleeping. She was fairly certain he was not sleeping. A man who had carried something for 4 years did not sleep the night before he finished carrying it. She turned off the lamp again. Did not try to sleep this time. Just sat in the dark and thought about 2 brothers. And a patent. And a deal that was supposed to close in 8 hours. And the man she had trusted most in her professional life, who had known about all of it for 4 months and said nothing. At 7:15 she was dressed. Different dress. Black this time, fitted, understated in the way that only read as understated if you were not paying attention, which was its whole point. She had her hair straight and down, the way she wore it when she needed to project calm. She was still building internally. Low heels. The kind you could stand in for 6 hours, without showing that you were standing in them for 6 hours. She looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. Then she picked up the folder. Both folders, actually. Her own and the copy of Damon's patent filings Brianna had printed at midnight. She went downstairs. Brianna was already in the small hotel lobby with 2 cups of coffee, and the expression of someone who had also not slept. "Did you find anything else?" Camille asked. "Jerome Cole," Brianna said. "I was going to tell you this morning. I didn't want to call at 2 a.m. I found it." Brianna looked at her. "I know," Camille said. "Get the car." The Stratos aviation facility was 40 minutes from the hotel on a cleared road. The storm had passed completely overnight and left the Texas morning in the clean fooch state that only happened after heavy rain. The sky a particular shade of blue that looked like something had pressed all the haze out of it. The flat ground, still wet and reflecting light, in a way that made everything look slightly unreal. Camille sat in the back of the car and said nothing for 35 of those 40 minutes. Then she said, "When we get in that room, I need you watching Raymond's feed. Everything. Every response. Write it down." Brianna said, "Yes." That was all. The Stratos conference room held 12 people. It held them in the way conference rooms always hold people for closing meetings. Attorneys arranged by side, financial representatives at the ends, the principals or the people everyone understood to be the principals at the middle of the table. Documents in neat stacks. Water glasses already poured. A video screen on the far wall showing Raymond Ashford's face in the crisp resolution of expensive bandwidth. He was wearing a dark suit. His expression was the composed, measured expression of a man who had been in rooms like this for 40 years and had learned exactly how much of himself to show. "Good morning, Camille," he said. "Good morning," she said. She sat down, opened her folder, did not look at the screen again. Evelyn Cross was already seated on the Stratos side of the table. 55, reading glasses on, 2 pens arranged parallel to her notepad. She had the specific stillness of a person waiting for something they know is coming. 2 Stratos board members, the investment bank's representative, a financing coordinator, everyone who was supposed to be here. And then, at 8:57, 3 minutes before the scheduled start time, the door opened. Damon Cole walked in. Same canvas jacket, same worn bag over one shoulder, the folder under his arm. No attorney beside him. No one beside him at all. He crossed the room without looking at Raymond's face on the screen. Sat down in the empty chair at the far end of the table. The chair that Camille now noticed had been left deliberately empty, in a configuration that would not have made sense for the number of people in the room, unless someone had known there would be one more. He set the folder on the table, put his hands flat on either side of it, did not open it yet. Raymond's voice came from the screen. Smooth, calibrated. "I believe we have a procedural item to address before we begin a beat. Mr. Cole, this is a private closing meeting. I'm not sure how you received notice of the time and location." Damon did not answer. He looked at Evelyn Cross. Something passed between them. Brief. The look of 2 people who have already discussed how this moment would go. Evelyn said, "I invited him." Raymond's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. Something that Camille caught, because she was watching him exactly as she had told Brianna to. "Evelyn," Raymond said, "this isn't the appropriate venue for. The Nova 9 primary patent assignment requires written authorization from the named rights holder," Evelyn said, not raising her voice, not shifting in her chair, just stating a fact in the voice of someone who has stated it before and will state it as many times as necessary. That authorization has not been obtained. The closing cannot proceed without it. The financing representative said something about this being a condition that should have been satisfied during due diligence. Evelyn said, "It was not satisfied." Raymond said, "This is an administrative matter. It can be handled after." "It is a rights matter," Evelyn said. And then she stopped talking, because that was all that needed to be said. The room went the specific kind of quiet that rooms go, when the thing everyone was pretending was not in the room has just been named out loud. Camille looked at Damon. He was already looking at her. He slid a single page across the table, stopped it in front of her with one finger. His hands were steady. She looked down. The operational relocation clause. Section 4, subclause 3. Standard language buried in the annexes. The kind of language that got called standard because it appeared so frequently it had become invisible, permitting the transfer of Nova 9 production and development operations to any Devereaux subsidiary or affiliated facility within 12 months of closing. She read it. She had read this document 11 times. She had flagged 100 provisions. She had not flagged that one, because her team's analysis had processed it as operational flexibility language. Standard. Common. The kind of clause that appeared in 9 out of 10 acquisition agreements, and meant, in practice, that the acquiring company could reorganize as needed, except, in this specific deal, with this specific technology, built by this specific team in this specific facility. That clause was not standard. That clause was a door out of Houston, out of Texas, out of the country, if someone wanted. She looked up. Remove it, Damon said, and I'll sign today. Raymond, from the screen, Mr. Cole. You are a patent holder attempting to obstruct a $500 million transaction. I want you to understand what that means for your position going forward. Damon looked at the screen then. For the first time since he'd walked in, he said, I'm not stopping you from buying Stratos. He looked at Camille. I'm stopping you from buying something nobody had the right to sell you. Camille called a recess. She said it in the tone she used when she needed people to understand that the next conversation would not include them. Brianna was on her feet before the word finished. The attorneys started gathering papers. The Stratos board members looked at each other. Raymond started to say something from the screen. We'll be back in 30 minutes, Camille said, and walked out. The hallway smelled like industrial carpet and recycled air, and the faint ghost of someone's coffee from early that morning. Camille stood against the wall just outside the conference room door and waited until she heard it close. Then she pulled out her phone. She did not call Raymond. She looked at the message thread instead. Their last 20 exchanges. Talked to him twice a day for 8 months about this deal. About every variable she could think of. About the board dynamics, the financing structure, the integration timeline. Not once. Not a single exchange. About the assignment clause. Miss Devereaux. She looked up. Evelyn Cross was standing in the hallway. I know what you're thinking, Evelyn said. Do you? You're thinking how much Raymond knew and when he knew it. Evelyn's voice was even. The answer is month 4. There was a memo. It went to him directly. Camille looked at her. I know, Camille said. I read it last night. Something shifted in Evelyn's expression. Slight respect, maybe. The recognition of a person who does not wait to be handed the picture. I need to speak with Damon, Camille said. Evelyn nodded. He's outside. He was. Around the side of the building, on a low concrete ledge that ran along the edge of the parking area, eating a gas station sandwich with the straightforward appetite of someone whose last real meal had been the previous afternoon. She walked over, sat down beside him without asking. He did not look surprised. She waited until he had finished the bite he was working on. Then she said, Why didn't you take whatever they offered you? He looked at the parking lot. They approached you? She said. Before the term sheet was even finalized. Raymond told me there was an intermediary. I found the wire transfer record last night. He was quiet for a moment. How much? She asked. $2 million the first time, he said. Sign the assignment and walk away. She nodded. That tracked with what she had found. And you said no. I said no. Because of the relocation clause. Because of the relocation clause, he said. And because of what the relocation clause actually meant. Which was that the people who spent years building something that mattered were going to watch it get moved to a facility where it could be produced cheaper, and nobody was ever going to think about them again. And I was supposed to sign the document that made that legal. Camille said nothing. My brother built that system, Damon said. He built the foundation of it. He believed it mattered enough to work on for years in a facility that was barely funded. He was right. It does matter. It's going to be in hundreds of aircraft. And what your deal was structured to do was take it as far from the people who understood it most as possible, in exchange for a lower production cost. He looked at her. $2 million to sign that document, he said. No. She had been preparing her next question. But it stalled. Because he had said your deal, not Raymond's deal, not Stratos's deal, hers. She had been building a counter-argument in her head, a reframing, a way to explain that she had not known about the relocation clause's implications, that she had not built this deal as a mechanism to erase anyone. And then he had said your deal, and she had realized that the counter-argument did not matter, because the document bore her signature, or would have in 40 minutes, if he had not walked through that door. She picked up the folder she had set on the ledge beside her, the counter-proposal, which she had taken from the conference table during the recess, without anyone seeing her do it. 11 pages. She had started reading it in the 30 seconds between the door of the conference room closing and Evelyn Cross appearing in the hallway. You prepared this before you came, she said. I prepared it 4 years ago, he said. I've been updating it. She opened it, started at the beginning this time. The Stratos facility in Houston to remain operational and independently budgeted for a minimum of 5 years. The Nova 9 development team to retain participatory rights in all safety-related decisions. No transfer of Nova 9 to any subsidiary or affiliated entity without Damon Cole's written approval for 36 months. Workforce protections for any Stratos employees affected by operational changes. She read it the way she read documents she intended to act on, which was thoroughly, and without performing thoroughness. He did not watch her read. He looked at the parking lot, the flat Texas land beyond it, a water tower on the horizon, white against the blue. She got to page 9, and found something she had not expected. Page 9 through 11 was not demands, was not protections, was a proposed integration framework, detailed, technically specific, built on a clear understanding of what Nova 9 needed to scale correctly. How the Devereaux operational structure could absorb Stratos without disrupting the team or the technology. Who should be involved in safety certification decisions. What the development roadmap looked like through the next 4 years. He had not prepared this to stop the deal. He had prepared it to make the deal work correctly. She read to the end, closed the folder, sat for a moment. This isn't a negotiation document, she said. No, he said. It's a blueprint. He said nothing. You could have sent this, she said, 8 months ago. Through an attorney. Through Evelyn. You could have put this on the table before the term sheet was signed. He was quiet for a moment. I tried, he said. Through Evelyn. She sent it to the right people on the Stratos side. It never reached you. A pause. You should ask Raymond why. She looked at the folder in her hands. She should ask Raymond why. She was going to. But first she needed to understand the rest of it. Page 11, she said. The acknowledgement section. He did not answer, but he knew what she was referring to. She could see it in the slight tension that moved through him. Not defensiveness, something older than that. The acknowledgement section was 5 lines. It read the contributions of Jerome A. Cole to the foundational development of Nova 9, as primary conceptual architect and lead systems designer, during the 2017 to 2019 development period, are hereby formally acknowledged as part of any transfer or licensing agreement pertaining to this technology. 5 lines. At the end of 11 pages of careful, technical, legally sound documentation. Like he had written everything else first and then put those 5 lines last, because they were the thing the whole document had been built toward. She looked at him. He was still looking at the water tower. Tell me about Jerome, she said. He turned then, just slightly, enough to look at her, not quite enough to face her, and she was not prepared for what she saw in his face, because it was not grief exactly, not the wet, collapsed version of grief that announced itself. It was the other kind, the kind that had been held and compressed, and lived with long enough that it had changed shape, become part of the architecture of a person rather than something they were still in the middle of. He said, "What do you know already?" "Obituary," she said. 2020. Workplace accident. March. He nodded, like he was checking something off a list. He came up with the original concept for Nova 9, he said. 2016. He was working at Stratos and I was freelancing, and he called me one night and walked me through this idea he'd been developing for 6 months, and I knew within 10 minutes that it was going to work, and I knew within 20 minutes that it was going to be important. He paused. We worked on it together for 2 years. Jerome was the lead, the concept, the architecture, the core logic. I handled the testing structure and the filing process, because Jerome was better at the actual engineering, and I was better at the paperwork. A faint quality in his voice that was almost dry humor. He used to say I was wasted as an engineer, that I should have been a lawyer. She waited. 2019, the company was in financial trouble, he said. Bad investment decisions. The board was considering shutting down the Nova 9 development program entirely to cut costs. Jerome went to Stratos leadership with a proposal. He would defer a significant portion of his compensation in exchange for an equity stake in the assignment rights. Keep the program funded. Keep the team intact. It was a good deal for the company. It was a sacrifice for him. He looked at the water tower again. He believed in it enough to do that. And your father's company, she said. Because the filing had mentioned Devereaux. Because she needed to understand the full shape of it. He looked at her. Devereaux Aerospace was one of Stratos's contract partners, he said. 2019. Your father's company was going through its own financial difficulty. Jerome went to Stratos leadership and proposed a technical collaboration that would stabilize the contract relationship and keep Devereaux in the partnership. He worked on that alongside the Nova 9 deferral. Nobody asked him to. He thought it was the right thing to do. Camille heard this, all of it. But the part she heard loudest was, nobody asked him to. Jerome Cole had helped save Devereaux Aerospace without being asked to. Without a contract, without being compensated. Because he thought it was right. And then, he died in March 2020, Damon said. Equipment failure at the site. He was in the wrong place when something gave way. He stopped. He was 34. Silence. Nobody told me about the compensation arrangement, Damon said. Not until a year later, when Evelyn found some of the paperwork and started asking questions. Your father had apparently prepared a formal acknowledgement. Compensation for the collaboration Jerome had provided. It was signed. It was ready to be delivered. He looked at her. It was never delivered, he said. She knew. She had found the folder last night. In her mind she had the image of it already. Her father's handwriting on the label. J. Cole 2019. The signed agreement inside. She knew who had held it. She knew why. She did not say it yet. I want to understand something, she said instead. You could have brought this forward years ago. The rights issue. The acknowledgement. You had standing. Evelyn would have helped you. You could have forced a disclosure. I know. But you waited. I waited, he said, for a version of this conversation where the person sitting across from me was not just looking for a way to make it go away. She felt that land, because she understood what he was saying. He had waited for someone who would actually read the 11 pages, not negotiate around them, read them. He had not been certain she was that person. He was still not entirely certain. She stood up, picked up the folder. I need to go back in that room, she said. He nodded. I need the full due diligence file pulled, she said. Everything. Not the summary. The raw correspondence from month 1. He looked at her. I found month 4 last night, she said. I need someone to walk me through everything Raymond received directly. He was quiet for a moment. Evelyn has it, he said. She's been keeping her own record. Of course she had. Camille looked at the folder in her hands. 11 pages. 4 years of preparation. Jerome Cole, 34 years old, standing in front of a Stratos facility in 2019, grinning because something had just clicked into place. She had not known about Jerome when she signed the rejection letter in 2018. She had reviewed Damon's application and said no, and moved on to the next file, the way she moved through most things that did not immediately announce their relevance. And she had not known that the man she was turning away was the brother of the man who had helped save her father's company. She did not know that then. She knew it now. I'll be back in 10 minutes, she said. She walked back toward the building. The Texas morning was doing what Texas mornings did after a clean rain, warm and bright, and carrying the smell of wet ground baking back into dry. She walked through it and thought about the folder in her hands and the name on the assignment clause, and the memo Raymond had received in month 4. Thought about do not let any individual party delay the closing. Thought about what it meant that Raymond had said that to her this morning, knowing everything he knew. Not a warning. Not advice. Management. He had been managing her. For 8 months and possibly longer, Raymond Ashford had been managing her the way you managed someone who trusted you. With small redirections. With strategic silences. With the phrasing of things as administrative matters. She walked into the building. Found Evelyn in the side hallway. I need everything, Camille said. Full correspondence file. Everything Raymond received directly. Month by month. Evelyn looked at her for a moment. Then she reached into the leather portfolio she was carrying and produced a folder. I've had this ready for 4 months, Evelyn said. Camille took it. She went into the small side office adjacent to the conference room. Told Brianna to hold the recess. Closed the door, sat down, opened Evelyn's folder. Month 4, the memo. Raymond's copy. She had already read this. Month 5. A follow-up email. Not from Raymond. From a consulting firm. Structured Capital Partners. A name she did not recognize. Discussing a framework for resolving the assignment issue through a private approach to the rights holder. Month 6. A response from the same firm, confirming that the first approach had been made. 2 million. Declined. She turned the page. Month 7. A second approach. Confirmed and declined. 5 million this time. Month 7. An internal note, handwritten. A scan of something on Ashford Capital letterhead. The word Apex circled. A dollar figure. 40 million. She stopped reading. Apex. She knew that name. Apex Aviation Group. Chicago. Direct competitor to Devereaux Aerospace. They had been trying to acquire navigational technology for 2 years. She had tracked them as a competitive threat. Apex Aviation Group and Ashford Capital, which was Raymond's family investment office, which had no formal relationship to Devereaux Aerospace, but which Raymond had always kept carefully adjacent, claiming it as a firewall between his personal investments and his board responsibilities. 40 million. She turned the page. Month 8. A draft agreement between Ashford Capital and Apex Aviation Group, structured as a consulting arrangement for facilitation of technology licensing. She read the terms. The deal she was closing tomorrow, the Devereaux acquisition of Stratos, would give Devereaux the right to relocate Nova 9 production within 12 months of closing. That relocation right was the mechanism. Once Devereaux owned Stratos and activated the relocation clause, Raymond's consulting arrangement with Apex would allow him to facilitate a sub-licensing deal. Apex would get access to Nova 9 technology through a structure that looked, on paper, like standard post-acquisition licensing. Raymond would receive $40 million. Devereaux would have paid $520 million for the shell of a company whose most valuable asset was being quietly walked out the back door. She sat with the page in her hands for a long time. The room was very still. A ventilation unit hummed somewhere in the wall. Outside the window, the Texas morning continued to be clean and bright and indifferent. She thought about the moment she would have to go back into that conference room. She thought about the call to Raymond she had made last night, his voicemail. The tone she had used when she called, which was controlled, which was measured, which was the tone of a CCO who has a question, not a CEO, who has found a paper trail connecting her most trusted advisor to a $40 million consulting arrangement with a competitor. She thought about 9 years old. Raymond calling early in the morning, her father answering with the voice he kept for Raymond, warmer than his business voice, the voice of a man talking to someone he trusted. She thought about 3 years ago, her father's funeral. Raymond standing beside her at the reception afterward saying, "He built something real. You're going to protect it." She thought about that. She picked up her phone, called Raymond. He answered on the second ring. "Camille." His voice had the quality of a man who knows a conversation has been coming and has had time to prepare for it. "I assume the recess is running long." "It is," she said. "I have a question, of course." "The month 4 memo," she said. "About the assignment clause. You were copied directly." A pause. "There were a number of memos during the diligence period," he said. "I'd need to see which one you mean." "You don't," she said. "You know which one." Another pause. Longer. "Camille," he said. "There were complications in the IP structure that we managed carefully to ensure the deal moved forward. That's what a good board member does. Manages the complications so the principal can focus on." "Raymond." He stopped. "I found the Apex file," she said. Silence. Real silence this time. Not the managed pause of a person thinking. The silence of a person who has just felt the floor change under them. "I need you to listen to me," he said. His voice was still even. Still the voice she had known her whole life. "What you think you found is a framework that was designed to protect Devereaux's interests in a complicated post-acquisition environment. Apex is a partner, not a competitor in this context. The structure." "Stop," she said. He stopped. She looked at the page in her hands, the dollar figure. 40 million. Ashford Capital. "I'm going to call the board," she said. "Tonight. And tomorrow, when we go back into that room, we are going to negotiate a deal based on the actual merits of the technology and the actual interests of this company. not on a structure built around a side arrangement that you failed to disclose. Raymond's voice when it came was quieter, lower. Camille, your father trusted me with. My father trusted you, she said. Yes, he did. She picked up Evelyn's folder and stacked it with the counter-proposal and her own documents. I am not my father, she ended the call. Sat with the phone in her hand. Outside the window, the water tower on the horizon was still there, white against blue. The kind of landmark that had been standing long enough to become part of the landscape that people stopped seeing even though it was always there. She had stopped seeing Raymond a long time ago. Had stopped checking because checking had felt like distrust. Had felt like a failure of loyalty. Had felt like something a daughter did not do to her father's oldest friend. She picked up Evelyn's folder, picked up the counter-proposal, picked up her own notes, stood up. She had a board call to make. She had a conference room to go back into. She had a deal to rebuild from the ground up, and she had 11 pages that would tell her exactly how to do it. She opened the door. Brianna was in the hallway, coffee in hand, waiting with the expression of someone who has overheard enough to understand that the situation has changed and is ready to work. Get me Dorothy, James, Camille said, and clear the next 2 hours. Already have Dorothy standing by, Brianna said. Of course she did. Camille walked back toward the conference room. The morning light was coming through the windows at the end of the hall. Warm, direct. The kind of light that did not flatter or soften anything. The kind that just showed you what was there. She walked into it. The night before the conference room, she had read until 2 in the morning. Then she put the folder down, turned off the lamp, lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything she had just found and everything it meant, and the distance between those two things, which was turning out to be the whole story. Month 5. Month 6. 7. 8. The due diligence file was thorough. Her team had done careful, well-organized work that produced a complete picture of Stratos Aviation's financials, operations, workforce, contracts, and liabilities. What it had not produced was a single follow-up to the Month 4 memo. The memo that had landed on Raymond's desk. The one about the assignment clause. The one that should have generated a conversation, a disclosure, a direct call to the CEO, who was about to sign a $520 million deal that could not legally close without a signature from a man named Damon Cole. No follow-up. No response. No trail. Like the memo had arrived and simply stopped existing. She had worked in this industry long enough to know that documents did not stop existing by accident. She turned over, looked at the window. The parking lot light was still making that thin stripe across the floor. Do not let any individual party delay the closing. Raymond had said that yesterday morning, before she knew about the clause, before she had run Damon's background, before she found the memo. He had said it like a reminder, like something she might need, except it was not a reminder. It was a warning wearing the clothes of advice. She sat up, turned the lamp back on, picked up her phone and opened the full patent filing document Brianna had sent her. Started at the beginning this time. Not the assignment clause. The whole document. Nova 9 Navigational Integration System. Filed 2019. Primary inventors Jerome A. Cole and Damon R. Cole. Assigned in part to Stratos Aviation under a deferred compensation agreement dated October 2019. Subject to the following conditions. She read the conditions. Then she read them again. Then she set the phone down and sat very still on the edge of the hotel bed in her burgundy dress she had never changed out of, and thought about one word. Jerome. Jerome A. Cole. Primary inventor. Listed first. Not Damon. Jerome. She had been focused on Damon, because Damon was the one who had answered his phone and said the one from 2019. Because Damon was the one the assignment clause named. Because Damon was the one she could see. Jerome had been the other name, the one she had not thought to search separately. She picked up the phone, typed the name, Jerome A. Cole, Houston, Aviation Systems. 3 results. The first was a LinkedIn profile not updated since 2020. The second was a brief mention in an industry newsletter from 2019, a note about the Nova 9 development team at Stratos. Jerome Cole listed second among 4 engineers. The third result stopped her cold. An obituary, posted in a Houston community paper, March 2020. Jerome Avery Cole, 34, passed away following a workplace accident. She put the phone down, picked it up again. Read the obituary twice more. 34 years old. March 2020. A workplace accident. At Stratos Aviation. She sat with that for a long time. Long enough that the parking lot light shifted as clouds moved across what remained of the night sky. Long enough that the hotel settled into the deeper quiet that only came after midnight, when the last door had closed and the ice machine had gone still. Jerome Cole had built Nova 9. Or co-built it. Built the foundation of it. And then he had died at the site where he built it. In the same year the patent was filed. And Damon had spent 4 years since. 4 years of preparation. 11 pages. A folder with soft corners from being carried everywhere and never quite set down. She understood now why she was almost certain he was not sleeping. A man who had carried something for 4 years did not sleep the night before he finished carrying it. She turned off the lamp, did not try to sleep this time, just sat in the dark and thought about 2 brothers, and a patent, and a deal that was supposed to close in 8 hours, and the man she had trusted most in her professional life, who had known about all of it for 4 months and said nothing. At 7:15 she was dressed. Different dress. Black this time, fitted, understated in the way that only read as understated, if you were not paying attention, which was its whole point. Hair straightened down. Low heels. Small gold earrings, her mother's, the ones she wore when she needed to remember who had come before her. She looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. Then she picked up both folders, hers and the patent filings, went downstairs. Brianna was already in the lobby with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of someone who had also not slept. Jerome Cole, Brianna said before Camille could ask. I found the obituary around midnight. I was going to call. I didn't want to wake you. I found it too, Camille said. Get the car. The drive to Stratos was 40 minutes on a cleared road. The storm had passed completely and left the Texas morning in that clean-washed state that only happened after heavy rain. The sky was an honest, unqualified blue. Camille sat in the back and said nothing for 37 of those 40 minutes. Then she said, when we get in that room, I need you watching Raymond's feed. Every response. Write it down. Brianna said, yes. That was all. The Stratos conference room held 12 people. Attorneys on both sides. Financial representatives at the ends. The principals in the middle. Documents in neat stacks. Water glasses already poured. The video screen on the far wall showing Raymond Ashford's face in the crisp resolution of expensive bandwidth. Dark suit. Composed expression. The face of a man who had been in rooms like this for 40 years and had learned exactly how much of himself to show. Good morning, Camille, he said. Good morning, she said. She sat down, opened her folder, did not look at the screen again. Evelyn Cross was already seated on the Stratos side. 55, reading glasses on, 2 pens parallel to her notepad. She had the stillness of a person waiting for something she knew was coming. At 8:57, the door opened. Damon Cole walked in. Same canvas jacket, same worn bag. The folder under his arm. No one beside him. He crossed the room without looking at the screen. Sat down in the empty chair at the far end of the table. The chair that had been left deliberately open in a configuration that made no sense for the number of people present. Unless someone had known there would be one more. He set the folder on the table. Hands flat on either side of it. Did not open it yet. Raymond's voice came from the screen. Smooth, even. I believe we have a procedural matter to address. Mr. Cole, this is a private closing meeting. Damon did not answer. He looked at Evelyn Cross. Something passed between them. Brief. The look of 2 people who had already discussed how this moment would go. Evelyn said, I invited him. Something moved behind Raymond's eyes. Camille caught it because she was watching him the way she had told Brianna too. Evelyn, Raymond said, this is not the appropriate venue for. The Nova 9 primary patent assignment requires written authorization from the named rights holder, Evelyn said. Not raising her voice. Not shifting in her chair. That authorization has not been obtained. The closing cannot proceed without it. The financing representative said something about due diligence. Evelyn said, it was not satisfied. Raymond said, this is an administrative matter. Handle it after. It is a rights matter. Evelyn said. And then she stopped, because that was all that needed saying. The room went the kind of quiet that rooms go when the thing everyone was pretending was not present has just been named out loud. Camille looked at Damon. He was already looking at her. He slid a single page across the table, stopped it in front of her with one finger. The Operational Relocation Clause, Section 4, Subclause 3, buried in the annexes, standard language, the kind that appeared so frequently it had become invisible, permitting the transfer of Nova 9 production and development operations to any Devereaux's subsidiary or affiliated facility within 12 months of closing. She had read this agreement 11 times. She had not flagged that clause, because her team had processed it as operational flexibility language. Standard, common, invisible, except in this deal, with this technology, built by this team in this facility. That clause was not standard. It was a door. She looked up. "Remove it," Damon said, "and I'll sign today." Raymond from the screen, "Mr. Cole, you are a patent holder attempting to obstruct a $500 million transaction. I want you to understand what that means." Damon looked at the screen then. For the first time since walking in, he said, "I'm not stopping you from buying Stratos." He looked at Camille. "I'm stopping you from buying something nobody had the right to sell you." Camille called a recess. The hallway smelled like industrial carpet and recycled air. She stood against the wall and waited until the conference room door closed behind her. Then she pulled out her phone. Did not call Raymond. Looked at their message thread instead. Their last 20 exchanges. Talking twice a day for 8 months. About every variable she could think of. The board dynamics, the financing structure, the integration timeline. Not one exchange, not one. About the assignment clause, Miss Devereaux. She looked up. Evelyn Cross was standing in the hallway. "I know what you're thinking," Evelyn said. "Do you? You're thinking how much Raymond knew and when he knew it." Evelyn's voice was level. "The answer is month 4. There was a memo. It went to him directly." "I know," Camille said. "I read it last night." Something shifted in Evelyn's expression. The recognition of a person who did not wait to be handed the picture. "I need to speak with Damon," Camille said. "He's outside," Evelyn said. He was. Around the side of the building, sitting on a low concrete ledge, near the parking area, eating a gas station sandwich with the straightforward appetite of someone whose last real meal had been the afternoon before. She walked over, sat down beside him without asking. He did not look surprised. She waited until he had finished the bite he was working on. "I need to understand the full picture," she said, "before we go back in that room." He looked at the parking lot, then asked. He said, "Jerome," she said, "tell me about him." He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone deciding whether to answer. The quiet of someone deciding where to begin. "He was 4 years older than me," Damon said. "Better engineer, better at the actual work. I was always the one who handled the paperwork, the filings, the documentation. Jerome used to say I was wasted as an engineer, that I should have been a lawyer." Something in his voice that was not quite a smile. He said it like it was an insult. She waited. "He came up with the original concept for Nova 9 in 2016, Damon said. "He was working at Stratus's and I was freelancing. And he called me one night and walked me through this idea he'd been developing for 6 months. I knew within 10 minutes it was going to work. I knew within 20 that it was going to matter." He looked at the water tower on the horizon, white against the blue. "We worked on it together for 2.5 years, he said. Jerome was the lead. The concept, the architecture, the core navigational logic. I handled testing structure and the filing process. By 2019 we had something real, and Stratos was in financial trouble," Camille said. "The board was considering shutting down the Nova 9 program entirely to cut costs," he said. Jerome went to leadership with a proposal. He would defer a significant portion of his compensation in exchange for an equity stake in the assignment rights. Keep the program funded. Keep the team intact. A pause. It was a sacrifice. He believed in it enough to make that sacrifice. She nodded. Around the same time, Damon said, Devereaux Aerospace was going through its own financial difficulty. Jerome heard about it through the contract relationship between Stratos and Devereaux. He went to Stratos leadership and proposed a technical collaboration that could stabilize the contract partnership. He stopped. Nobody asked him to, he said. She heard that. All of it. Jerome Cole had helped save Devereaux Aerospace without being asked, without a contract, without compensation. Because he thought it was right. He died in March 2020, Damon said. Equipment failure at the site. He was in the wrong place. He stopped. He was 34. Silence. I didn't know about the compensation arrangement he had made for the Devereaux collaboration, Damon said. Not until a year later when Evelyn found some paperwork and started asking questions. Apparently your father had prepared a formal acknowledgement, signed it, ready to be delivered. He looked at her. It was never delivered, he said. She knew. She had found the folder last night. She had the image of it already in her mind, her father's handwriting on the tab. JC 2019. The signed agreement inside. She had not told Damon she found it yet. Not yet. Why didn't you bring this forward years ago, she said. The rights issue. You had standing. Evelyn would have helped. I tried, he said, through Evelyn. She sent the counterproposal to the right people on the Stratos side. It never reached you. A pause. You should ask Raymond why. She was going to. The counterproposal, she said. I read it last night, all 11 pages. He glanced at her. It's not a negotiation document, she said. No, he said, it's a blueprint. For how to do this correctly. He said nothing. You could have sent this through attorneys 8 months ago, she said, before the term sheet was signed. You had every right to put this on the table formally from the beginning. He was quiet for a moment. I tried the formal channels, he said, twice. Before you were brought in as the deal principal. The approaches went nowhere. After that, he stopped. After that, I needed someone to be in the room who would actually read what I put in front of them. Not negotiate around it. Read it. He looked at her. I didn't know if you were that person, he said. I wasn't certain until this morning. She held his gaze. What changed this morning, she said. He said, you called a recess. You didn't try to pressure me in the room, you came out here. She looked at the parking lot, the flat Texas land beyond it. Page 11, she said. The acknowledgement section. Jerome's name, he did not answer. But she saw it move through him. Not defensiveness, something older. That's what you came for, she said. Not a question. He was quiet for a long time. The assignment clause was the mechanism, he said. The reason I had standing to be in that room, the deal restructuring, the facility protections, the team, all of that matters. All of that is real. He stopped. But Jerome built the foundation of what you're buying, and nobody was going to put his name on it unless I made it impossible for them not to. She nodded. Slowly. She stood up, picked up the folder she had set on the ledge beside her. The counterproposal. I need to go back in that room, she said, but first I need the full due diligence correspondence file. Everything Raymond received directly. Evelyn has it, he said. She's been keeping her own record. Of course she had. Camille walked back toward the building. The Texas morning was warm and clean and carrying the smell of wet ground still drying out. She walked through it and thought about two brothers working in a low industrial building on a problem they believed mattered, and about one of them not making it to see whether they were right, and about 4 years. She found Evelyn in the side hallway. I need everything, Camille said. Full correspondence. Everything Raymond received directly, month by month. Evelyn reached into the leather portfolio she was carrying and produced a folder. I've had this ready for 4 months, Evelyn said. Camille took it, went into the small side office, closed the door, told Brianna to hold the recess, sat down, opened Evelyn's folder. Month 4, the memo. Raymond's copy. She had already read this. Month 5, a follow-up email. Not from Raymond. From a firm called Structured Capital Partners, discussing a framework for resolving the assignment issue through a private approach to the rights holder. Month 6, a response from the same firm. The first approach had been made. 2 million. Declined. She turned the page. Month 7, a second approach confirmed. 5 million this time. Declined again. Then an internal note, handwritten, scanned from Ashford Capital letterhead. The name Apex circled. A dollar figure. 40 million. She stopped. Apex. Apex Aviation Group, Chicago, direct competitor to Devereaux Aerospace. She had been tracking them as a competitive threat for 2 years. They had been trying to acquire navigational technology and had not been able to close anything significant. Ashford Capital was Raymond's family investment office. He had always maintained it as a firewall from his board responsibilities, always presented it as separate. $40 million, she turned the page. Month 8, a draft agreement between Ashford Capital and Apex Aviation Group, structured as a consulting arrangement for facilitation of technology licensing. She read the terms carefully. The deal she was closing, the Devereaux acquisition of Stratos, would give Devereaux the right to relocate Nova 9 production within 12 months of closing. That relocation right was the mechanism. Once activated, Raymond's consulting arrangement with Apex would allow him to facilitate a sub-licensing deal. Apex would get access to Nova 9 through a structure that looked, on paper, like standard post-acquisition licensing. Raymond would receive $40 million. Devereaux would have paid $520 million for the shell of a company whose most valuable asset was being walked quietly out the back door. She sat with the page in her hands. The room was very still. She thought about the moment she would go back into that conference room. She thought about 9 years old. Raymond calling early in the morning. Her father answering with the voice he saved for Raymond, warmer than his business voice. The voice of a man talking to someone he genuinely trusted. She thought about 3 years ago. Her father's funeral. Raymond standing beside her at the reception saying, "He built something real. You're going to protect it." She thought about that specifically. Then she picked up the phone and called Dorothy James. Dorothy answered on the first ring, which told Camille everything she needed to know about how much Dorothy already understood. "Camille," Dorothy said. "Dorothy, I need an emergency board session. Tonight." "I know," Dorothy said. "I've been expecting this call for about 6 weeks." Camille stopped. "You know, I know something has been wrong with this transaction for longer than you've been aware of it," Dorothy said. Her voice carried the authority of a woman who had watched a great many things unfold over many years. "Tell me what you've found," so Camille told her. All of it. The month 4 memo. The private approaches to Damon. The Apex file. The $40 million. The consulting arrangement structured through Ashford Capital. She talked for 11 minutes without stopping, laying it out in the order she had found it. Dorothy listened without interrupting. When Camille finished, there was a pause. "The Apex arrangement," Dorothy said. "Documentation. Evelyn Cross has been building a file for 4 months, Camille said. "I have copies of everything, all right," Dorothy said. "Full board by 7 tonight video. You'll present what you have." "Yes, Camille," Dorothy's voice shifted, more direct. "Your father trusted Raymond for 30 years. What you're about to do tonight is not a small thing." "I know," Camille said. "I'm not telling you not to do it," Dorothy said. "I'm telling you to know what it is." "I know what it is," Camille said. She ended the call, sat for a moment, then picked up the counterproposal. She did not need to read it again. She had absorbed it. She was acting from it. She opened the office door. Brianna was in the hallway. "Get me 2 hours in the conference room," Camille said. "Keep Evelyn and her team. Clear everyone else. And hold Raymond's video feed. I'm not ready to speak with him until I have the full picture in front of me." "Already started," Brianna said. The next 2 hours were the kind of work Camille was built for. Not the closing, the before. The deep, careful work of reading a situation without the protective filter of what you expected to find. She and Evelyn sat at the conference table, with the full correspondence file spread between them. Evelyn walked her through it month by month, not just the documents Camille had found on her own. The complete record. Emails, internal memos, the phone call log Evelyn had been keeping manually, because she did not trust the digital record to stay intact. It took 90 minutes. When they finished, Camille sat back and looked at the table. The documents were arranged in chronological order. 8 months of a deal being built around a problem that everyone responsible had chosen not to surface. A pattern that had the orderliness of something constructed rather than something that had happened. She looked at Evelyn. "Why didn't you go to the Stratos board directly?" she said. "When you first found the Apex notation." "I did," Evelyn said. Month 7. 2 board members. Both told me it was above their pay grade, and that Raymond had been advising Stratos since before they joined the board. She took off her reading glasses, set them on the table. "I am the general counsel of a company that was already in financial difficulty. Raymond had relationships here going back 15 years. I was one person with a file and a concern and no authority outside my own office. She paused. So I kept building the file, and I waited for someone with authority to walk through the door. Camille looked at her. You told Damon to come, she said. I told Damon that if he was going to exercise his rights under the assignment clause, the time was now, Evelyn said. I told him the deal was 8 weeks from closing and that if he waited any longer there would be too much momentum to stop. She paused. He had already been preparing for 4 years. He did not need much convincing. Camille thought about that. About Damon sitting on the concrete ledge, eating a gas station sandwich, like a man who had been patient enough that one more day was simply another day. He knew this was the only way it would work, she said, getting into the room. He knew the assignment clause gave him the standing to be there, Evelyn said. He also knew that a document and a legal right were not the same thing as having the conversation. He needed someone across the table who would actually engage with what he was putting forward. She looked at Camille. That part he could not plan for. He had to wait and see who walked through the door. Camille picked up the counterproposal from the table, held it, 11 pages. She thought about him writing this, revising it, over 4 years, keeping it current as the industry changed. As Nova 9 got closer to the deal that was always coming, she set it down. At 2:30 she went looking for the box. It had been in her bag since Atlanta. The full Devereaux historical file on the Stratos relationship, which she had pulled together before the trip because she believed in having primary sources when she was about to close something significant. She had gone through most of it on the plane. She had not gone through all of it. She opened the accordion file on the side office desk, pulled out the contract records from the 2019 Stratos Devereaux collaboration. They were clean. A technical consulting arrangement. Stratos to Devereaux, October 2019. Behind the contract records, at the very back, was a folder she had not seen before. Craft paper. Her father's handwriting on the tab, JC 2019. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single document. 4 pages. A formal acknowledgement and compensation agreement on Devereaux's aerospace letterhead, describing Jerome A. Cole's contributions to the 2019 technical collaboration, assigning compensation at a rate commensurate with senior technical consulting work, expressing, in language that was formal, but that she could hear her father's voice inside of, genuine gratitude for work done in good faith at a time when it mattered enormously. Signed, her father's signature. At the bottom of page 4, the deliberate signature of a man who had made up his mind. Dated November 2019. Jerome Cole died in March 2020. 4 months. This document had existed for 4 months, while Jerome was alive. Her father had signed it in November, and it had never reached Jerome, because Raymond had it. She knew this without documentation. She would find the documentation later, and she did find it, in a follow-up email chain in Evelyn's file, where Raymond referred to an outstanding compensation matter for a J. Cole that he was handling directly, and that should not be included in the formal contract file. Handling directly, which meant holding, which meant deciding on his own that the timing was not right. Jerome died in March. The document sat in Raymond's hands from November to March, and then was quietly filed into the Devereaux archive, where it would not inconvenience anyone, where it had sat for 4 years, where she had just found it. She set it on the table, looked at it. Her father had done the right thing, had looked at what Jerome contributed and prepared a formal acknowledgement and signed it, and it had never arrived. She sat with that for a long time, past the first wave of something she might have called anger if it hadn't moved so quickly into something quieter, something that felt more like grief, except it was not her grief. It was adjacent to it. The feeling of seeing clearly something that had been obscured for years, and understanding that the obscuring had cost a real person something real. Jerome had not known, and her father had not known that Jerome did not know, and nobody had told either of them until one of them was gone and the other was dying. She closed the folder, picked up her phone, called Damon. He answered on the 3rd ring. I found something, she said. In the Devereaux's archive, a folder. My father's handwriting on it. She paused. JC, 2019. Silence. longer than the pauses before. Evelyn told me it might exist, he said. She found a reference to it. Raymond mentioned an outstanding compensation matter for Jerome in an email she kept from 2020. He called it unresolved. She knew your father had prepared something, but she couldn't get to it directly. It was in the Devereaux archive. It's a formal compensation agreement, Camille said. 4 pages. My father signed it. November 2019. She heard him breathe. A single breath that he let out slowly. Jerome never knew, he said. Not a question. No, she said. I don't believe he did. The silence that followed was the kind she did not try to fill, because some silences were not waiting for anything. They were what happened when something that had been unclear for a very long time became suddenly and completely clear. She let it sit. He let it sit. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me." She said, "I'm going to the board tonight, and tomorrow when we go back in that room, we're restructuring this deal from the ground up. Your terms." A pause. "Terms that work," he said. "Not just mine." "That's what I mean," she said. She ended the call, sat with the signed document in front of her. Then she placed it carefully in her folder. Front position, where she would find it immediately when she needed it. She had Raymond to deal with before the board session. She had been putting it off, not from fear, from discipline. She wanted every piece in her hands first. She wanted to walk into that conversation the way her father had always walked into difficult ones, knowing exactly what she knew, not wasting a single word. She pulled up the email chain, the one with the Apex reference. Read it one more time. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to be certain she was not misreading it, not overstating it. She was not overstating it. She called Raymond at 4:15. He answered immediately, which was also unlike him, which meant he had been waiting. Camille. His voice had something new in it, a register slightly below his usual one. "I owe you a conversation." "Yes," she said. "You do. The situation with the patent rights is more complicated than it may appear from the outside," he said. "There were structural considerations I was managing on behalf of the deal's success. The approach to Cole was an attempt to resolve a complication before it became." "Raymond." He stopped. "I found the Apex file," she said. Silence. Not the managed pause of a man choosing his words. The silence of a man who has just felt the floor change. He recovered. Faster than she expected. She gave him that. "What you're describing," he said, "is a contingency arrangement. A way to ensure that if the primary acquisition faced complications, the technology would still find a productive path forward. That kind of parallel planning is standard risk management in complex transactions. At $40 million to you personally," she said, "through your family office." A pause. "That figure represents fair compensation for facilitation services that Raymond." Her voice was flat. "You were going to let me sign a deal that moved Nova 9 out of this country, out of the hands of the team that built it, into a competitor's portfolio, using a relocation clause I did not know was a mechanism, while you received $40 million through a consulting arrangement you never disclosed." She stopped. "Tell me how that is risk management." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, the composure still there but thinner now. "Your father and I built something together over 30 years, he said. "The decisions I made were in service of protecting what he built. Sometimes protecting something requires decisions that cannot be fully explained in the moment." "The compensation agreement," she said, "for Jerome Cole. My father signed it in November 2019. You received it. You held it for 4 months. Jerome died in March." A longer silence. "That situation was delicate," he said. "There were questions about the appropriate structure for acknowledging contributions that had not been formally contracted. I was working through the right approach. For 4 months," she said. "These things take time." "Jerome did not have time," she said. A pause. Then Raymond said, "I could not have known what was going to happen to him." "No," she said. "But you had 4 months to deliver what my father signed. You chose not to. Every week of those 4 months was a choice." Raymond said nothing. She looked at the document. Her father's signature, November 2019. "My father trusted you," she said. "He trusted you with something he had signed and intended to deliver. And you decided the timing wasn't right, and then Jerome was gone." She stopped. "I don't know what you were waiting for, Raymond. I have stopped trying to understand it. But I need you to hear me very clearly right now. She waited. I'm listening, he said quietly. I need your resignation from this transaction filed with Dorothy James before 7 o'clock tonight, she said. And I need you to understand that the board is opening a governance review. Not as a threat, as a fact. They will review the full due diligence correspondence and the pattern of non-disclosure, and they will reach whatever conclusions they reach. He said, Camille, I have known you since you were 9 years old. I know, she said. Your father would not have. My father signed a document for a man who helped save this company, she said, and that document sat in your hands for 4 months and never arrived. A pause. My father would have had something to say about that. I think you know what it would have been. Silence. Long enough that she checked the call was still connected. Before 7, she said. She ended the call. Sat in the quiet of the side office. She had expected to feel something more dramatic. Some release of the pressure that had been building for the past 36 hours. Instead, she felt the particular stillness that came after a necessary thing had been done. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Just the fact of it. Done. She stood up. Walked to the window. The Texas afternoon was doing what Texas afternoons did. Getting hotter and brighter before the evening came in. The water tower was still there. The flat land, the unchanged horizon. She thought about her father. Not about the deal. About him specifically. The way he had handled things she had watched him handle when she was young. He did not dramatize. He sat with the difficulty of a thing until he understood it completely. Then he acted on what he understood. And he was not moved by the reaction. She hoped she had learned it well enough. At 6:45, Raymond's resignation letter arrived in Dorothy James's inbox. Dorothy forwarded it to Camille with no message. At 7 o'clock, the full board assembled by video. 11 members. 9 present immediately, 2 joining within the first 2 minutes. The speed of people who had been told this was not optional. Camille sat at the conference table with Brianna to her right and the full document stack to her left. The video screen showing 11 faces, all of them waiting. Dorothy James in the center of the grid, watching. Not speaking. Camille said, I'm going to walk you through a timeline. I'm asking that everyone hold questions until I'm finished. This will take approximately 20 minutes. No one said anything, she started. Month 1 through 3. The diligence work. The IP review. The patent structure of Nova 9, and the significance of the assignment clause. Month 4. The memo. Raymond's copy, the date. No follow-up, no disclosure. Month 5 and 6. The private approaches, the wire transfer records. Month 7. The apex notation. The consulting framework, $40 million. She laid it out in the same voice she used when she needed a room to understand something without distraction. Not loud. Not dramatic. Facts in the correct sequence. Because facts in the correct sequence did not need help. When she finished, she put down the last document and looked at the screen. 11 faces. Dorothy said, Are all documents referenced available for board review? Yes, Camille said. Evelyn Cross at Stratos has maintained a parallel file. I have copies of everything. Dorothy looked around the grid. I want to hear questions, she said. Camille, not commentary. Questions. 3 board members asked questions. About the financing adjustment. About the timeline for restructured negotiation. About the governance implications. Camille answered each one directly. Then Dorothy said, close session. Camille, I'll ask you to step out for 15 minutes, of course. She walked to the window at the end of the hall. The one that looked on to the parking lot and the water tower and the Texas evening going gold. Brianna brought coffee without being asked. Camille drank it. 17 minutes passed. The door opened. Dorothy James was looking directly at the camera. The board authorizes you to proceed with a restructured negotiation, Dorothy said. On terms you determine appropriate based on the merits of the technology and the actual interests of this company. Camille said, Thank you. The board is also opening a formal governance review of the due diligence process and the pattern of non-disclosure, Dorothy said. This is not punitive. It is necessary. We did not have access to information we should have had access to, and we need to understand how that happened and ensure it does not happen again. One more beat. Raymond's participation in this transaction is suspended effective immediately. pending the review's findings. The session ended at 8:40. Camille sat in the empty conference room for a few minutes after the screen went dark. Just sat. Not processing. Not planning. Being still in the room where tomorrow morning she was going to walk back in and do this correctly. She thought about Damon in his hotel room. Whether he had eaten a real dinner or another gas station sandwich. She thought about the folder with soft corners and what it had taken to carry that for 4 years without letting it show. She thought about Jerome, 34 years old, standing in front of the Stratos facility in 2019, grinning, because something had clicked into place. She pulled out the JC folder, her father's signature, the deliberate ink of a man who had made up his mind. She looked at it for a long time. Then she placed it carefully in her bag, front position, where she would find it immediately when she needed it. Tomorrow she was going to deliver it to the person it had always been meant to reach, 4 years late, but there, and she was going to sit across from Damon Cole and restructure a $500 million deal from the ground up, based on 11 pages prepared by a man who had shown up with a canvas bag, and the 4-year patience of someone who understood that truth, if you built the ground for it correctly, would eventually stand on its own. She stood up, collected her documents, walked to the car. The Texas night had come in fully now, clear after the storm, the sky doing what it did out here away from city light. Stars in the kind of quantity that reminded you the sky was actually that large. Always had been. You just couldn't usually see it. She got in the car, looked out the window as the driver pulled out of the Stratos lot. The water tower, Paz on the left. Still there, the same as it had been this morning and would be tomorrow morning. She did not look at her phone. She looked at the sky and she thought, tomorrow. She did not sleep well, but she slept, which was different from the night before, when she had not slept at all. This night she slept in the way you sleep when you have done the thing that needed doing, and your body finally decides it is allowed to rest, not comfortably, not deeply, but enough. 3 hours, maybe 4. She woke at 5:45 with the folder on the nightstand and the Texas dark still outside the window, and the full weight of what today was sitting on her chest like something she had chosen to carry, which she had. She chose it. She got up, showered, stood in front of the mirror and thought about what to wear for longer than she usually did, which was a sign she was nervous, which she almost never admitted to herself, so she admitted it now. Nervous. Fine. She was nervous. She put on the deep green dress, the one she saved for moments that required her to feel like herself, rather than like a version of herself she was performing for a room. Fitted through the bodice, skirt falling below the knee, the kind of cut that moved well and looked serious without trying to look serious. She wore her hair straightened down. Small gold earrings, her mother's, the ones she wore when she needed to remember who had come before her. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like her father. She had always looked like her father. The line of her jaw, the steadiness in her eyes, the way her face did not betray what she was thinking unless she decided to let it. He had loved that about her. She picked up both folders, hers and the JC file, went downstairs. Brianna was in the lobby with coffee, and a look that said she had also not slept particularly well and was prepared to work anyway, which was why Camille had hired her 4 years ago and had not stopped being grateful for the decision since. Car's ready, Brianna said. Has Raymond tried to contact anyone on the board since last night? Gerald, Brianna said. 3 calls. None answered. Camille nodded. Does Damon know the session is restructured? She said. Evelyn told him at 8 last night, Brianna said. He confirmed he'd be there. Good. She picked up her coffee, walked to the car. The drive to Stratos took 40 minutes, and she spent 38 of them looking out the window at the Texas morning, which was doing something she had not expected after 2 days of rain and drama. It was being beautiful. Genuinely, straightforwardly beautiful. The sky was that particular early morning blue that existed for only about 20 minutes before it deepened into the full day, and the flat ground on either side of the road was still holding the rain in the low places. Small standing pools that caught the sky and reflected it back doubled, so that for a few miles it looked like you were driving through a world that was entirely made of light. She looked at it, thought about Jerome standing in front of that building in 2019, grinning. Thought about Damon carrying that grin in his wallet for 4 years. Thought about her father, who had never met Jerome Cole in person, as far as she knew, but who had signed a document for him with the good pen and had meant it to arrive. Some things took longer than they should. They arrived. The Stratos conference room looked the same as it had yesterday morning. Same table, same chairs, same water glasses already poured, but something in the air of it was different. The documents on the table were different. Not the closing stack from yesterday, which had been quietly removed. These were Camille's documents, the counterproposal, the restructured framework, the governance timeline, her documents, on her table. That felt different. The Stratos attorneys were already seated. 2 of the board members from yesterday. Evelyn Cross at the far end, reading glasses on, same 2 pens. She looked up when Camille came in and gave her a single nod. The nod of a woman who had been waiting for 4 years for this morning, and was not going to waste it on ceremony. Camille nodded back. She set both folders at her spot. Sat down. The video screen on the wall showed Dorothy James's face. The full board was not assembled this time. Just Dorothy, representing the board's authorized position, and 2 other members. No Raymond. The space where Raymond's face would have been. Just empty screen, which was its own kind of statement. At 8:59, Damon walked in. Canvas jacket, worn bag, the folder. Same as yesterday and the day before. Exactly the same. Because he was a man who had decided what he was coming to do, and what he was carrying was not a costume but a fact. He sat down at the table. Not at the end this time. In the middle, across from Camille. She looked at him. He looked at her. And for a moment, just a moment, she thought about the shuttle van and the thin stripe of parking lot light on the hotel room floor, and the phone she had picked up at midnight to start reading. She thought about how thoroughly she had misjudged the first 30 seconds. He said, "Morning." She said, "Morning." That was all. They had the whole room for the rest of it. Dorothy James spoke from the screen. Her voice carried the authority of a woman who had earned her position across decades, and did not need to remind anyone of that. "I want to confirm for the record that the board of Devereaux Aerospace has authorized CEO Camille Devereaux to proceed with restructured negotiations on the Stratos Aviation acquisition. The terms of that restructuring will be based on the counterproposal submitted by the primary rights holder of the Nova 9 patent. The board has reviewed the proposal and found it sound." She paused. "We are also confirming for the record that a governance review has been initiated regarding the conduct of the previous transaction process. That review is internal, it is ongoing, and it is separate from today's proceeding." She looked at Camille. "Camille, you have the floor." Camille opened the counterproposal, and then she set it aside, because she had read it enough times to know it without looking, and because the people in this room, Damon, Evelyn, the Stratos board members, deserved to hear it from her voice, not from her reading. Deserved to understand that she was not processing these 11 pages. She had absorbed them. She was acting from them. The counterproposal, she said, does 3 things. It protects the facility, it protects the team, and it protects the technology from being moved outside the control of the people who understand it best. She looked at Damon. "I agree with all 3. He held her gaze. Said nothing. "The operational relocation clause is removed entirely," she said. "The Stratos facility in Houston remains operational and independently budgeted for a minimum of 5 years. The Nova 9 development team retains participatory rights in all safety-related decisions regarding the system. No transfer of Nova 9 to any Devereaux subsidiary or affiliated entity occurs within 36 months without written authorization from Damon Cole." She paused. "Workforce protections remain in place for any Stratos employee affected by operational changes for a period of 2 years, with full retraining and placement support funded by Devereaux." She looked at the room. "The purchase price adjusts to $488 million, she said, reflecting the due diligence irregularities and the restructured terms. One of the Stratos board members glanced at the other. Camille said, "The adjusted figure reflects what this deal is actually worth under the correct structure, not what it was worth under the structure that was not disclosed to me." She let that sit. Then Dorothy said, "Damon, you've reviewed the restructured terms as proposed." Damon said, "I have. And you're prepared to proceed on this basis." Yes, he said. With one addition. Camille looked at him. He said, Page 11 of my counter-proposal. The acknowledgement section. I need that included in the formal agreement as a binding clause. Not a recital. A clause. The acknowledgement section. Jerome A. Cole, primary conceptual architect, lead systems designer. 2017 to 2019 development period. Formally acknowledged. Permanently on the record. Yes, Camille said. No hesitation. One of the attorneys on the Devereaux side started to say something about the standard form of acknowledgement clauses in acquisition agreements. Camille looked at him. As a binding clause, she said, as Mr. Cole has requested. The attorney looked at his notepad, wrote something down. Agreed, he said. Evelyn Cross, from her end of the table. I'll have the updated draft ready within the hour. Damon sat back slightly, and Camille saw something move through him. Not relief exactly, not triumph. Something quieter. The thing that moved through a person when a task they have been holding for a very long time is about to be completed. She knew that feeling. She was beginning to feel it herself. The next hour was the procedural work of deals, the revised draft moving between attorneys, the financing adjustments being confirmed with the consortium representative by phone, the board authorization being documented formally for the record. Dorothy on the screen, watching, occasionally asking a precise question and accepting the precise answer. The work of closing something the right way. At 10:40 the revised agreement was on the table. Clean. 23 pages. The operational relocation clause absent entirely. The acknowledgement section on page 19, binding exactly as Damon had requested. The page that said Jerome A. Cole is hereby formally acknowledged as primary conceptual architect and lead systems designer of the Nova 9 navigational system, and this acknowledgement is incorporated as a material term of this agreement. Material term. Not a footnote, not a recital, a material term, which meant it was as legally significant as the price, as the facility protections, as anything else in the document. Jerome Cole was on the record, permanently. Damon read the agreement in full. He read it the way she had read his counterproposal, thoroughly, without performance every page, because he was a man who did not sign things he had not read. She watched him and did not rush him, and the room did not rush him. He turned the last page, picked up the pen that Evelyn had set beside him, signed. Camille signed, the attorneys signed, the Stratos board members signed, and then it was done. Not with fanfare, not with the specific release of energy that television suggested closing a major deal felt like. With something quieter, the quality of a room that has been holding its breath for a long time, and has just very carefully exhaled. Evelyn collected the signature pages, organized them in the way she organized things, precisely and without ceremony. Dorothy James said, "Congratulations to both parties. This is a good outcome." And then she was gone from the screen. The attorneys began packing their briefcases. The Stratos board members shook hands with the Devereaux team. Brianna was already on her phone, beginning the cascade of notifications that followed a closing. Camille did not move. She sat at the table with her hands folded and looked at the signed agreement and thought, this is the deal my father would have wanted. Not the first version. This one. She was glad she had found it. She looked up. Damon was still at the table. Everyone else was moving. He was sitting with his folder closed in front of him, and his hands resting flat on either side of it, and his eyes on the window. She had seen him sit that way before, at the regional airport, in the waiting room with the rain outside. The posture of a man who had arrived somewhere and was taking a moment before he moved. She let him have it. After a minute, he picked up the folder and put it in his bag. She had not watched him do that before, but she had imagined it somehow, based on what he had said about it. 4 years, the soft corners. He set it down, picked up the bag. She said, "Can I ask you something?" He looked at her. "Last night," she said, "when I told you about the JC file, that my father had signed it, you already knew it existed." "Yes," he said, "but you didn't know what was in it." He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. Evelyn knew it was in the archive. She couldn't access it directly. "So you came here not knowing if the document said what you hoped it said," she said. He looked at her steadily. "I came here because the assignment clause needed to be addressed. he said. That was the mechanism. That was the reason I had standing to be in this room. He paused. The document wasn't what I came for. What did you come for? He said. To put Jerome's name on something that couldn't be taken off. She nodded. She picked up the JC folder from beside her documents, held it for a moment. I have something for you, she said. She set it on the table in front of him. He looked at it. Her father's handwriting on the tab, JC 2019. He did not open it. He looked at the handwriting. Then he looked at her. My father signed a formal compensation agreement for Jerome in November 2019, she said. It was meant to be delivered. It wasn't. I found it yesterday in the archive. He said nothing. It should have reached Jerome, she said. It didn't, and I can't change that. But it can reach you, and it can be part of the record. He looked at the folder for a long time. Then he picked it up, opened it slowly. Read the first page. The second, she watched his face while he read, watched him absorb what her father had written. The formal language carrying something inside it, that formal language sometimes carried when the person writing it had meant every word. He read to the end, looked at the signature. He sat with it for a long time. She did not say anything, did not offer anything, just sat across from him and let the document be what it was in the hands of the person it should have reached. His jaw worked slightly. Once, that was the only thing. Then he closed the folder, set it on the table, put his hand flat on top of it, said, "Thank you," she said. "It belonged to you." He nodded. He picked up the folder, put it in his bag, carefully, in the front, where it would be easy to find. Different from the other folder, the one with soft corners that had just been set down. This one was going somewhere specific. She stood. He stood. They walked out of the conference room together, through the hallway, past the small office where she had sat with Evelyn's documents the morning before, past the window at the end of the hall, with its view of the parking lot and the water tower. Outside, the Texas morning was doing the thing it did when it was fully committed to being good. Hot already and bright and carrying the smell of the wet ground from 2 nights ago still baking back up, and the sky an honest unqualified blue. They stood in the parking lot, not saying anything immediately. The way two people stood was when the thing they had been moving toward was finished, and there was a moment before what came next. She said, "Where do you go now?" He said, "Back to Houston. I have a consultation I keep rescheduling. For Stratos, among others." He looked at the facility building, the low industrial building that had existed long enough to look like part of the landscape. "I work with 3 companies on navigational systems oversight. I like the work." She looked at him. "You could have had a career inside a company," she said. "At your level. With your work, I know," he said. "You chose not to." "Jerome and I talked about it," he said. He liked being inside. He liked the team, the continuity, being in the same building with the same people every day. "I liked being able to move." He paused. "After he died, I thought about changing that. Getting an office somewhere. Stability." He looked at the water tower. "I decided it wasn't what Jerome would have wanted for me. He wanted me to do what worked for me." She heard that. She thought about what worked for her. 3 years of running Devereaux Aerospace, which was mostly what worked for her, except for the parts she had not examined closely enough. The parts she had trusted other people to handle. The parts she had not looked at directly, because looking felt like distrust. That was the part that didn't work. She was changing that. He said, "The consultation agreement in the counterproposal. For Nova 9 integration. You'll be compensated at the appropriate rate," she said. "Quarterly engagement. We'll work out the schedule. I don't need a Devereaux aircraft to get to meetings," he said. She almost smiled. "I know. I'll book my own flights. Middle seat." He looked at her. Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile. The thing adjacent to a smile that was actually warmer. "Middle seat," he said. She looked at the building. She thought about what this place would be in 5 years. The facility still here. The team still here. Nova 9 in the aircraft it was supposed to be in. Jerome's name on a legal document that could not be altered. A thing that mattered. Still where it was built. Still doing what it was made to do. "My father used to say," she said, "that the best deals were the ones both sides could be proud of in 10 years. Damon looked at her. "You think he'd be proud of this one?" he said. She thought about it honestly. "I think he'd be proud of the version we got to," she said. Not the first version. He nodded. Jerome would have liked him, Damon said. Your father. Jerome liked people who did the right thing when it cost them something. She looked at her hands. It cost him, she said. He signed that agreement knowing Raymond would push back. He signed it anyway. I know, Damon said. That's how I knew. She looked up. That's how you knew what? That there was a version of this that could work, he said. The agreement told me that someone at Devereaux had wanted to do right by Jerome. That didn't come from nowhere. It came from the kind of person who built the company. He paused. I didn't know if that person's successor was the same kind of person. She held his gaze, and she said. He looked at her for a moment. You read the counterproposal, he said. You didn't just skim it. You read it, and you didn't try to negotiate around it. You came back and said you agreed. He paused. That told me. She had not thought about it that way, had not thought about herself being read the same way she had been reading him. But of course, he had been assessing her from the first moment, the same way she had been doing with him. The shuttle van pulling away from the regional airport, both of them watching, both of them measuring. She said, I misjudged you at the airport. I know, he said. I put you in a category and stopped looking. Most people do, he said. That's not an excuse. No, he said. It's not. Not gentle about it. Not unkind either. Just honest. And she respected that more than she would have respected kindness. She said, I want to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. All right. The application in 2018, she said. When I rejected it, do you know why I did? He was quiet for a moment. She said, I reviewed it personally. I know that. But I don't remember the reason I gave. He said, insufficient industry experience at the senior level. She looked at him. That was the written reason, he said, on the rejection form. She thought about 2018, the year she was running 2 departments, the year she was managing a board transition and proving herself, the year she had reviewed dozens of applications and made fast decisions based on the surface of what was in front of her. Insufficient industry experience. Jerome Cole's brother, 2 years into developing Nova 9. Freelancing navigational systems work for 3 aerospace companies. Insufficient industry experience. She said, that was wrong. He looked at her. The assessment was wrong, she said. And I should have caught it. And I didn't. He said, you were running a department. You made a call. I made the wrong call. Yes, he said, not cruelly. You did. She nodded. Because she needed to hear it, and he was someone whose honesty she had come to trust in the span of 48 hours, which was not a long time but was apparently enough time for that, when the circumstances were what these circumstances had been. She said, I'm not going to ask you to pretend it didn't happen. Good, he said, but I want you to know that I see it now. The whole picture. She paused. Not just the parts that were convenient to see. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Jerome used to say that the only thing worse than not seeing something was seeing it and looking away. He paused. You didn't look away. That landed. Not because it was generous. Because it was accurate. And because accuracy from him felt like something she could trust. She said, the consulting arrangement. When it starts. Whenever you're ready to begin the integration timeline, he said. January, she said. We'll start the technical review in January. I want to do it right. January works, he said. She reached out her hand. He looked at it for just a moment, then shook it. His hand was steady, dry, the handshake of someone who had done what they came to do and was finished performing anything about it. She said, thank you for not walking away. He said, I told Jerome I'd finish what we started. She said, you did. He nodded once. Then he picked up his bag, adjusted it on his shoulder, turned and walked toward the far end of the parking lot, where a car was already waiting. Not the hotel car service, something he had arranged himself. She watched him go. Brianna appeared at her elbow with a phone, and a look that meant 3 people needed to be called in the next hour, and the board wanted a follow-up memo by end of day, which was fine, which was the work. She took the phone, but she stood there for another moment first, watched until his car had pulled out of the lot and turned onto the 2-lane road and disappeared in the direction of Houston, which was his city, which was where he would go back to his office, that was not really an office, and his 3 consulting clients, and his work that he was good at and that mattered. The water tower was still there. It would be there when she came back in January. She thought about that. Coming back to this building in January. Sitting in a different kind of meeting. A working meeting, the kind where people were solving a technical problem together, rather than negotiating around a structural one. The kind of meeting where the thing being discussed was the work itself. She was looking forward to that in a way she had not looked forward to a meeting in a while. She turned and walked back toward the building. 6 months later, the Stratos facilities outside Houston ran its first fully integrated Nova 9 field test under the Devereaux ownership structure. The engineering team had been preparing for it for weeks. The test involved a controlled simulation of cascade electronics failure in a mid-range commercial aircraft mock-up, the kind of failure scenario that had been the original problem Jerome Cole had been thinking about when he started sketching the concept in 2016, the scenario that kept pilots up at night because the existing systems had a gap in them. And everyone knew the gap was there, and no one had closed it. Nova 9 closed it. The positional data held through the entire cascade. Every parameter Jerome had originally specified, every parameter Damon had refined and tested and retested over 8 years. It worked. Not dramatically. Not with the kind of sudden explosion of results that made for good television. It worked the way something works when it was designed correctly, and built correctly, and tested correctly. Steadily, completely, within every margin. Someone looked at the output screen and said, "That's it." And that was it. The team stayed late. Someone drove to the gas station down the road and came back with 2 cases of cold drinks and a sheesh and cake from the grocery store bakery that said, in blue frosting, in slightly uneven letters because whoever had ordered it had described it over the phone, Nova 9. They ate cake in the facility break room. They had the specific quality of people who have worked long and carefully on something genuinely important and are allowing themselves, briefly, without pretension, to feel it. There was a chair at the corner of the table that nobody sat in, not because anyone had decided to leave it empty, because somehow, without discussion, everyone had. Damon sat across the room and looked at the chair and did not say anything about it. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at the window. The Texas night outside. The water tower lit from below, the same water tower still there. Camille had sent a message at 5 o'clock. 3 words, how did it go? He had sent back 2 words. It worked. She had sent back 1. He looked at the chair. He thought about Jerome in the parking lot in 2019, calling him on the phone that night, walking him through the concept. The way Jerome's voice had gotten faster as he talked, because that was how Jerome's voice always got when something had clicked, faster and looser and less careful, like the idea was moving through him too quickly to regulate. "I think we can close the gap," Jerome had said. "The positional gap. I think there's a way." There had been a way. It was in the aircraft now. Or it would be soon, as the certification moved through its stages. It would be in hundreds of aircraft. In the systems that kept people safe at altitude in the moments when the primary systems couldn't be trusted. Nobody on those aircraft would know Jerome Cole's name. Damon knew that. He had always known that. It was not the point. The point was the gap. The gap being closed. The thing that mattered, mattering the way it was supposed to. The point was the chair. Not empty because Jerome was absent. Empty because he had been there. Because a chair left open for someone meant something. Because the people in this room, most of whom had known Jerome, some of whom had worked alongside him in this same building, had understood without being told that leaving a chair was not a gesture of grief. It was a gesture of presence. Damon picked up his drink, did not toast, did not say anything, just held it for a moment, quietly. Then he drank it. He left the facility at 9:30. The drive back to Houston took 40 minutes on the clear road. He had a consultation call in the morning, the first of 3 this week, and he needed to be up early. He drove with the window down because the Texas night was the right temperature for it. The flat land going by in the dark, the occasional light. He thought about January, about the Devereaux integration meetings that were scheduled to begin then, the technical review sessions, the work of making Nova 9 work correctly inside a larger operational structure without losing the things that made it work correctly in the first place. He was good at that. The bridge work, The translation between what engineers had built and what organizations needed to understand about what engineers had built. Jerome used to say he was wasted as an engineer. Maybe. But he was not wasted. He thought about Camille. Thought about her sitting across from him at the conference table with the green dress and her mother's earrings and the folder that had belonged to Jerome, and the way she had set it on the table in front of him without making a speech about it. Just, this belongs to you. He had not expected that. He had expected the deal, had expected even, that the deal would be fair, once she had seen everything she needed to see. He had not expected the folder, had not expected to sit in that conference room, holding his brother's name in their father's handwriting on Devereaux Aerospace letterhead with the good ink, and feel something he had not felt in 4 years. Not closure. He did not believe in closure. Closure was a word people used when they needed the grief to have a shape they could contain. He believed in continuation. Jerome's work continuing. Jerome's name on the record. The gap closed. The chair left open. All of it continuing. He pulled off the highway at his exit. The Houston lights coming up around him. The city doing what it did at night, spreading out in every direction like it had decided there was no reason to stop. He parked outside his building, sat in the car for a moment, pulled out the JC folder. He had read it 3 times since she had given it to him. He would probably read it again tonight. Not because he needed to, because her father's signature was in there. Her father's handwriting on the tab, JC 2019. He did not know if his father and Camille's father had ever spoken. He did not think so. But his father would have understood the man who signed that document, would have said, "That's a man who knew what was right." Even if the right thing had arrived late, it arrived. He put the folder back, got out of the car, walked into his building. He had a call in the morning. 3 consultations this week. A technical review starting in January with a company that was going to do this correctly. He was going to sleep. But first he stood at the window of his apartment for a few minutes. The Houston night outside. The lights of a city that was always moving, always building something, always in the middle of something that was not finished yet. He thought about Jerome saying, "We built something that matters. That's enough." He looked at the lights. He did not think it was enough. Exactly. He thought it was the beginning of enough. He thought that what Jerome had built was going to keep mattering for a long time. Was going to keep being in the systems that kept people safe. Was going to keep having Jerome's name on it, formally, legally, in a document that could not be altered. That was not the same as enough. That was better than enough. That was the kind of thing that continued. Far away in Atlanta, Camille Devereaux sat in her father's office, which was her office now. Had been her office for 3 years. She was still getting used to calling it that. Her office, not from insecurity but because she had grown up calling it his office. And the habit of a name was the last thing to change. She was at his desk, which was also her desk now. In front of her was the Stratos file. Closed, the deal done. The signed agreement in the archive. The governance review ongoing, which would take months and would produce findings that would change how Devereaux ran its due diligence process going forward, which was the point. Beside the Stratos file was something else, a blank sheet of paper. She had been sitting with it for 20 minutes. She had been thinking about what her father had written. The language of the compensation agreement for Jerome. The formal language that carried something inside it. The thing that formal language carried when the person writing it had meant every word. She had been thinking about what she wanted to say. Not to anyone specific, not a memo, not a document. Just to herself. About what the last 3 days had been. She picked up a pen. Not the good pen. That one was still in the desk drawer. She was not ready for the good pen yet. She wrote. 1 sentence. Some things take longer than they should. That doesn't mean they don't arrive. She looked at it. Thought about Jerome standing in front of a building in 2019 grinning. Thought about Damon in a middle seat holding a folder, on his way to finish what they had started. Thought about her father in this office at this desk, signing a document with a pen he saved for things that mattered. She folded the paper, put it in the top drawer. Then she closed the Stratos file, stood up and turned off the desk lamp. Tomorrow there would be work. There was always work. The board memo, the integration planning, the governance review, the 100 other things that running a company required. But tonight, she walked to the window of the office that had been her father's and looked out at the Atlanta night, the city going in every direction, the lights of it spreading out like something that had decided a long time ago it was not going to stop. She thought about a chair left open in a break room in Houston, about a folder with soft corners finally set down, about a document with the good ink signed in November 2019, arriving where it was supposed to go, 4 years late. But there, and somewhere above the flat Texas land and the water tower and the roads that ran between the small airports and the industrial parks and the places where people built things that mattered, a future aircraft was being certified, was going through its stages, was preparing to carry people at altitude through the conditions that had always been the hardest, through the failures and the recoveries and the moments when the primary systems could not be trusted. And in those moments, something would hold. Something built by two brothers in a low industrial building outside Houston. Something that had a name on it now, the right name, and the people in those aircraft would never know. And that was exactly the point.